that's why we're looking for the additional funds.
See, I'm still confused.
Right.
It doesn't take much. But you're saying, you're asking for more money because they worked overtime. They worked Saturdays, Sundays, and overtime during the week, and you said that you had to have an engineer or someone on site to do the inspection services. And I agree. And it's a time and material basis, that person's gonna be paid for it, or your firm's gonna be paid for it. But now you're saying, if I understand correctly, what's been paid so far has used up what was slated to be paid by the town. So now the town board needs to add an additional $120,000 for payment.
Before we expend that money, yes.
Okay.
For work going,
You're increasing your,
how for work going forward? The
Right.
120 is for work going forward.
right, it hasn't been done yet.
Right.
So we either pay $120,000 or we don't get it inspected.
Can I address this? Because when this issue came up at the pre-board, I spoke negatively about it, let's put it that way. Because I think when Jim was explaining it, I'm not sure he was exactly clarifying or explaining at least to me, to my understanding, which is why are you asking for another $120,000? You've got a contract. I've since had the opportunity to look at the contract, and the contract has some very specific numbers in it. But in the portion that relates to the engineering inspection services, it specifically says that this is an estimate only based on a 16-month contract, okay? And that since that time, and that it says in a number of places that in the contract, that this is an estimate subject to change based on circumstances. What they have presented to the town board is an explanation of those additional circumstances. To wit, the project is taking longer than was originally contemplated. The inspection services have been more intense, you might say, because there's been more building, and there are apparently some additional buildings going on, and some off-site work that wasn't contemplated in the original specs, in the original contract. So basically, after I reviewed it, I concluded that the engineers, his firm, had a legitimate reason to ask for additional funds. Now, obviously, they're still going to have to submit the invoices, they're going to have to be approved, they've got to go to EFC, and so forth. In addition, while we were talking about this, I think Councilwoman Mangold is going to offer an amendment that basically assures that this process or this additional costs have to be approved by EFC. So the contract has a little chart that says time and materials, or some phrase like that. I'm not sure that's the exact proper phrase that you should be using, but it's clear what they mean. Certain of the tasks have a very specific dollar amount under the contract. In this one area that we're working in, they asked for flexibility. The town agreed to that. So at least it was my recommendation to the board. I mean, I haven't looked at the time sheets and all that. I assume that has to be provided both to the engineers and the town and so forth.
It was provided with the backup information at the board after a month prior.
Okay. So, or at least from my point of view, it's a legitimate, once the board determines that there was extra work performed, that it's a legitimate request.
Hey, Dave, can I explain to you why I don't think it's legitimate? It says in the contract, we will not exceed any estimated fee amounts without written authorization from you.
Right.
Did Chazen receive written authorization from the supervisor prior to doing the work? We got a letter here, in November. It says in April of this year, the contractors determined that an extended workday was needed to complete work, and the work schedule was subsequently changed. As a result of these changes, our inspector has been on site for more than 50 hours per week. A second 40-hour-per-week inspector has also been needed to oversee site work, and there is an extra coordination time. So they've known about this since April, but we didn't receive this letter until November. So the business about estimates only is correct, but their contract says we will not exceed any estimated fee amounts without written authorization from you. In the absence of written authorization from the town, they were working at risk. And we're under no obligation to pay that bill.
I'm not clear that they have actually at this point exceeded.
We have not.
No, my understanding is what the reason they're submitting this at this point is that they're moving along at a faster rate, or they're using up hours at a faster rate than that was anticipated, and they're about to run out of the cap that's set in the contract, so they're giving us notice of this, and we have the opportunity to review, to say yes, to say no. And again, I would say I was fairly skeptical, and I think I expressed that in front of the board when Jim started talking about this, and we saw this, but as I reviewed the contract language does give them flexibility. Now, it's a decision for the board. Do we want to sort of try and force the game? Do we want to dispute this? How do we want to handle it? But if you conclude that they're doing the work, that they're doing it well, that they put the hours in that they say they have, and certainly they have the records for that, then I think it's a legitimate claim on their part. And I ask that that not be held against me, in case we ever have to do it.
If I can add one thing, a little later in the agenda, we're going to talk about lifting the consent order and the moratorium on sewer connections. And that is tied to a scheduled date of certain works being completed at the wastewater treatment plant by the end of this month, 15 days from now. What occurred, and if people are familiar with construction projects, this is New York State. We put all of this work out to bid, and you accept the bidder that is the lowest responsible bidder, and they are provided with a construction sequence of events that they are supposed to follow. That construction sequence of events in the contract with the contractor, which is available for public review, does not say you will do this in 30 days and you will do that in 30 days. It says you must have the following things finished by December 31st of 2014, period. End of story. You go past that, liquidated damages apply. That was very, very critical on this project because we wanted to achieve the town's consent order. We wanted to meet those requirements so we could lift the order after 14 years. It's been in place for 14 years. That was very important. Sometime over the summer, the contractor realized it had not been executing the work rapidly enough to achieve that deadline. Their response to that is to put more man materials on site because they know they have to meet that end deadline. When they put more man materials on the site in a very intensive way, in a very short time frame, it requires additional inspection. That inspection is being conducted on your behalf to make sure that they're actually doing what they're supposed to do, that it's fungible under your financing, and that you're getting what you're paying for. That's very important. So to that end, Chazen, Delaware Engineering, we do not control how the contractor puts man and machines on that site. That is the cause for the additional work.
So are you saying that they didn't need prior written authorization to
I-
exceed the funding by $120,000?
Not saying any of that at all. I'm stating a fact about how the
That's a lot of
construction
money.
project is being
I'm saying that they haven't exceeded that amount yet. In other words, there's a contract amount. They're required to give us written notification and get our approval before they exceed that, and I think that's what he's doing.
Yeah, but we have to adjust the financing to account for this.
Well,
How are we going to pay for
I
this?
think that's one of the issues. I mentioned that council member or board member Mango had drafted some languages we were talking here about requiring as a condition of the resolve that the additional hours or additional expenditures be approved by EFC as part of the amount that they would fund.
And a couple of months
Jim
ago,
advises me he thinks that's not a problem. I think he's got a sunny view of the bureaucracy of the EFC, but, you know, that's what
a
he's
few
at.
months ago, this board actually submitted an amendment to something called the intended use plan. The money that we're using for this project comes from the state. It's initially funded by the federal government. The state takes the money, invests it, gives out money, gets loan payments back, and uses that money to fund additional projects. In order to do all of that, the state is required annually to prepare something called an intended use plan. You have to tell the feds and everybody else in the public, what are you going to do with all this money? Hundreds of millions of dollars. So this intended use plan, which is available to the public, is on the Environmental Facilities Corporation website. The current one is dated October 1st.